Hi, my name's Carl Runk, and I coached the University of Arizona a long time ago. I'd first like to apologize for not being with you all this evening. I have a phobia for flying. It affects me a great deal. I don't like to do it. And physically driving that distance is out of the picture. I just can't do it. And I'm sorry that I can't be with you all this evening. But I'd like to thank the selection committee for their choices this year. I think it was politically correct thing to do. And all the inductees are bona fide AARP members. That's quite an accomplishment. On the selection of the inductees, Don Golus. Oh, Don was quite a guy. You know, he was the glue in the University Lacrosse program. He was a behind the scenes type of person, and he made things go. He was really persistent, and he refused to take no for an answer. But he was the person who contacted me first about the Arizona position, and Don has always been a very good friend. Chuck Mcchesney was the oldest player on the team. Chuck was a good midfielder, but he had a bad tendency of tripping over the midfield line on clears. I always thought Chuck had bought stock in Johnson & Johnson with medical wraps. He was usually taped from his ankle to his neck. Sometimes you couldn't see his face, but you could always depend on that little bugger. Nice little lacrosse player. Now, Bobby Caston was a good defender. Bobby had good size to him. He played excellent position on his opponent, but he would usually shut him out. Now, Bobby was capable of throwing different checks and was a strong leader on our team. He was a strong contributor to our squad, and it was a pleasure to work with Bobby. He's done real well. Jay Lair. Jay was really a piece of work. He always had trouble with Chuck. He was just like Chuck. I think they both had stock in Johnson & Johnson. When Jay would come out to practice, he would come out dressed like a hockey goalie. He wore steel-tipped shoes. He wore baseball shin guards. He wore football pants with knee pads and thigh pads in it. He wore a baseball chest protector. And on top of that, he had a lacrosse pad, a goalie's protector. And then he had elbow pads along with that. Jay had a low tolerance for pain, but when he and Chuck Mcchesney would argue on a field, they sound like two old women at a bingo gang. And I quite often I thought to myself, what the hell am I doing here? Now, Willie Cooper was an excellent midfielder. He was a great ground ball man. He made things happen on the field. Willie also assisted me in coaching. He was outstanding. You could always depend on him, and he was just a great person. Willie, when I left the University of Arizona, made me a gift, and it was a pyramid about 8 to 9 inches high, and it was metal, and it had all kind of little lights on it. And down the bottom, it had a button. When you set it down, it would actually light up, and then it would start. All these lights would start blinking. And I told Willie, I said, Willie, I really love this. I said, this is really something, but can you help me out? What the hell is it? And Willie said, well, Carl, it's a conversation piece. He says, you put it down, it starts to blink. He says, and the greatest thing about it, you will never see the same pattern in your lifetime on this thing. And I thought, my gosh, this is really great. Well, I took it home, and I put it on a counter. And it was going off, and my wife came in, Joan came in, and she said, what the hell is that? And I said, well, that's a conversation piece, hon. That's a conversation piece. That's a gift from Willie Cooper. And she said, what does it do? I said, well, Willie told me that you'll never see the same sequence of lights blinking in your lifetime. Isn't that fantastic? And anyhow, she told me at the time, yeah, it's fantastic. Get the hell off my shelf. So anyhow, that's the end of that conversation piece, but I've got a new place for it, and it really helps people to relax and relieve themselves. You know, it was a pleasure to coach at the University of Arizona. The one problem we had was away games, and when we traveled away games, the big problem here was preparing transportation, feeding the kids, lodging. You know, we were coming home from a contest up in Colorado. And on the way home, it was late. It was around 3 o'clock in the morning, and we were really tired. And I was the lead car, and I suggested that we pull off into the next stop when we could. and we came into a town, Truth or Consequences, New Mexico. And I remember no lights whatsoever, and I figured what I've got to do is look for a big lot. And if we could find a lot, we could park on the lot, and then we could all sack out for about an hour, hour and a half, give us a break. And as far as driving is concerned, we stopped on a lot. I saw a lot. We stopped, and it didn't take us long to go to sleep. And before long, I felt prodding, and I looked up, and there was a police officer prodding me with a rod, and a handful of squad cars with their lights on, blinking, and they were wondering what the hell we were doing on that parking lot. And I said, well, we're sleeping. And he said, well, what are those sticks for? And I said, well, they're lacrosse sticks, and we just finished playing a game. I thought I'd throw in the Air Force Academy, make it sound important, at the Air Force Academy. And I said, we're on our way home, and we're tired. He said, well, you can't sleep here. We thought you were robbing this bank. You parked on a lot that belongs to a bank. He said, you got to go down the road and park somewhere else. He said, but follow me, I'll take you out and show you the proper place to park, which he did. That was quite a thrill that evening. Thinking parking at a place where we felt we were going to get a good rest, but we got woke up by the police, and they didn't know they never heard of lacrosse in their life. Quite an experience. We'd get on the road either going to a contest or coming from a contest, and we'd have to travel 1,200 miles. That's a long way to go. And you'd have to stop and take a break. And when we did that, we'd stop at a store, at a big old grocery store somewhere along in New Mexico or up in Colorado. And I'd go inside and buy all kind of beefs, cheese, sauces, and all kind of things, and things to drink. And what we would do is we'd put the beef and all the cut up meat on the hood of the car, and then we would have the doors open, and the kids would literally circle the car, take the bread first, which is one fender, and then they go around to the meat, put the meat on their bread, and then they go down and they had their ketchup and mustard, spray that on, and then at that point they would go down and they'd get their Kool-Aid, and then they'd just sit down the street and start eating. And we would sit there till all the food was gone because we had no way of taking it with us. So we'd just eat it all, and they could eat it. They did a hell of a job, and at that point we were up and gone again. When we got to the contest, it was the responsibility of the home team, the Air Force Academy, to put us up and to feed us. We played University of Colorado. They would put us up and they would feed us. We played Denver. They would put us up and feed us. Or we might have Utah come in and we'd stay at the University of Colorado. But they took care of us. And this was a procedure that you used when you played this game out west, taking care of one another. And it was a great thing. One of the benefits of the travel, and it was a long way to go, and it took a couple days, was that they had a promotional thing in different states, and they referred to it as a green stamp book. If you collected so many green stamps and you filled so many books, you were capable of going out and buying a piece of apparatus for the house. And I made sure that our 4 cars would stop at the same station that had green books only. And then we'd go in and I would collect all the green stamps, and that made Mom at home very happy. I'd go back and we were able to get a toaster. I think we got a toaster, and I think we got a small vacuum cleaner from the stamps. But that was something that was important to us. We didn't have it, and it meant a lot to us. And but one thing I've got to tell you, we never had any complaints from our players. They were really great. They just went. It was like just water off the back of a duck. They just went through with it, no problem whatsoever. Now, we played at home. We had a lot of fun. I had connections with the equipment manager at the University of Arizona. Turkey Thomas was his name, and I was able to get football jerseys, and I was a handful of them that they weren't going to use, and I was able to get football pants. And we cut the pants down and from about 6 inches up from the knee. And that gave us our uniform. I also had a young man out there he took care of the fields. He would mark the field for us, and that helped us out a great deal. We had that kind of support, and it meant a lot to us. But we were playing a game in the stadium, and we had a young guy by the name of Jim Brunner. Big old defenseman. He could have played a tight end on a pro team. He was just a good-looking athlete. And anyhow, Jimmy he was good, but he was tough as nails. And he was covering an attackman coming around the cage. And he came, and that attackman got to the sideline. And when he come up to front of the cage, Jim Brunner took his stick and held it up at the 12 o'clock position, and he came down on that youngster's head so hard. And he came from a 12 o'clock position to a 3 o'clock position with that stick, and that youngster seemed to sink into the ground up to his knees. And he was laid out, and the official threw Jimmy out of the game, unsportsmanlike conduct. And when he's coming off, I said, Jim, what the hell are you doing? He said, Coach, I didn't even touch him. And I looked at him, I said, did you get the number? He says, the number of what? I said, the damn card hit him, because if you didn't hit him, something big hit him, he's still laying out there. Jimmy was a hell of an athlete, and that I thought was funny as heck. Davon Schumacher was a nice little attackman. He played very well for us, and he's the only attackman we had at the University of Arizona that made the North-South game. And he came back here to Johns Hopkins and played in that North-South game, and he did a great job. Davon Schumacher was a good player. He came up to me one time, and he said, Coach, I'm not going to be able to practice today. And I said, David, what's the problem? He said, well, I got a real hard sore and hurting in my thigh. And I knew Dave had a tendency to go off a little bit. And I said, Dave, I got the perfect thing. Don't worry about a thing. I had a little medical box, and I took the medical box, and I took 2 aspirins out of there. And I said, Dave, where does it hurt? And he said, well, he showed me, Coach, it hurts here, and it hurts here on his side, about 3 inches apart. So I took an aspirin, put one part of his thigh, and put the second aspirin a little lower. And then at that point, I taped it up. And he looked at me, and I said, Dave, this is a new procedure they're using in sports medicine. It's going to work. It's just going to take about 15 minutes. You're going to feel better. And I walked away. And you know that dodo come up to me in 15 minutes. Coach, it does. It works. I feel better. Keep it on, Dave. I said, keep it on. Don't take that thing off. I'd like to take this time and opportunity to thank you all for this honor, Hall of Fame. It's quite an honor to me. I'm so proud. And I want to thank all the players who contributed during the course of the years that I was at Arizona. I know I'd go to banquets back here in Baltimore, and or we'd have not a banquet, but a clinic at our school. And anytime we had a clinic, we'd have all the coaches from the area come in, and it was really great. And I'd see 3 lacrosse players, Phil Bodenhorn, Scott Hayes, and Jay Greer. And they always came to our clinics. And one thing I did, I always introduced them. I always introduced them as young men who played for me at the University of Arizona. I was very proud of that. That meant a great deal to me. Last year we had a banquet downtown to the IMLCA, and I was being honored down there. And when I came into the banquet hall, the first person I came into was the gal who runs the show. And she said, Coach, we got a great crowd. She said, but guess what? You got a couple guys from Arizona here. And I said, oh my God. And she told me that it was Phil Bodenhorn and Jay Greer. And not Jay, but Scotty Hayes. I was overwhelmed. That really meant a lot to me, and I really appreciated that. And I searched them buggers out, and we sat down and we had a great talk about old times. What a beautiful experience. I want to thank you all for everything you've done for me. And again, thank you for this award.